The all-new WMEG Radio.
Welcome back to Business in Motion, a program that focuses on business and entrepreneurship from an Afrocentric perspective. I'm your host, RGL Biz Coach. I'll tell you, things are changing, as I had stated. And again, the magic of stories and the power of perception. As we go on, as you learn more, you're going to see why it is so powerful and why narratives play such a vital role in your life. But as you heard in the first segment, we're now into perspectives. And let me say this before we move any further. Make sure to follow me. Go onto my social media. Go into Business, capital letter in Motion on YouTube. And give me those likes and follow me. There's going to be a lot of good things that's going on. And the same thing with the other social media. I'll speak a little bit more about that as we move on prior to ending the show. But I want to say African leaders now are advocating that one government. And this is not the first time that they've thought of that. But what would happen before is when a leader would try and make it or try and gain some ground with it, something typically happened. That leader would be overthrown through coup, he'd be assassinated or whatever. A lot of times these were like isolated incidents. There was no continuity with communication, and the people were just kind of left out there. And again, I go back to the invent of the telephone, of this smartphone, where now people have access to information, even if they happen to be living in a remote village with no running water, with no electricity. They are still plugged into this World Wide Web, and they're getting this information. They're learning things that they never learned before. And coupled with the fact that our universe is shifting. I just can't overemphasize that simply because it is. And I want to say, I told you so. I told you these things are going to happen, and you're going to see more and more and more. And if you are a person who happens to be richly melanated, all I can say is to really benefit from what's going on the most is to try and cleanse your blood, cleanse your system as much as possible, and be the best person that you can absolutely be so that the energy will flow with less resistance. That's what I got for you right now. But as I mentioned, those African nations, they're speaking of one government, utilizing one currency, one military. That way you don't have coups and all these things that are going on, because it would be just one military. Now that frightens the whole world, is when people start speaking about that. But you're doing nothing. It's like nothing remains constant. What goes up, comes down. That's just the way that the universe is. That's the way that life is. Things don't remain constant. They change. And where we are right now, as I mentioned in the past, going into this new age is the age of you. It's the age for you. It's time for you to make your mark, to get out and to do your thing in businesses. And it's not even just business. It is bringing a new philosophy to the planet, because the planet, it's in need of it. Just look at it. Just look at the way things are right now. It's in need of your input. If you are right, if you have yourself together, it's in need of it. Yes. Let's talk about fiat currency for a little bit. It used to be back in the day, the first form of monetary exchange, or an item that was considered of value that could be given to another, was a cowrie shell. Now, cowrie shell, you'll find those, a lot of them, they'll come up from the Indian Ocean, and some maybe from the Atlantic Ocean, but out of those oceans right by Africa. And those they're very popular, especially in Africa today, and they become very popular among African American people. They're very beautiful, but the narrative was that they were washed up. They came up to land because the god, it was like the goddess of the ocean would bring them up, and that was to really do something good for the people who happened to be there. They could get these, and they were so desirable. They felt like they brought good luck. And so what people could do with them is they could exchange. They could give them. If you wanted something from another, if you had the cowrie shells, you could use that as the same as the way that we use money today. Now, let's fast forward. A little bit later, what became the basis for monetary exchange was gold. And that went on for ages, and then it's still, gold is such a valuable mineral. Well, anyway, it's a very valuable substance. I'll put it like that. Okay, it doesn't tarnish. A lot of things doesn't happen to gold, and it is, as far back as we can remember, it was something that was really sought after. I just happened to be looking at a program the other day, and it said that if you took all the gold that had ever been mined on this planet, since human beings have been here, it wouldn't fill up a football field. If you took the size of a football field and went up 30 feet, that would be all the gold that has ever been mined. Okay? But anyway, gold was the basis. It was what was used for currency, for an exchange for goods and services. Then later, let's go a little bit further. They came up with something to get off the gold standards, okay, and started using just basically paper. It's just like fiat currency. It's just paper, and it's kind of just based on a belief and a perception. You would take this simply because you know that you can give it to another person and get some things that person might have, because they believe in that dollar that you give them, or whatever the currency might be, no longer backed by any precious metal, mineral, or anything like that. It's fiat currency. Now, the government that they're speaking about bringing into existence on the African continent, if they came together, would be backed by the gold and the resources that are underground. Now, if that were to occur, that money becomes the most powerful money. It will be the most powerful monetary system that there is on earth, without a doubt. So again, the perception of something of value is now what we use as fiat currency. And if you break it right down, what does back it? And I'll tell you, it's not much. Nothing at all. Versus what they're speaking about bringing into existence, if all of them are able of getting their act together. And again, I know there's going to be a lot of turbulence. There's going to be all sorts of things that's going to be going on. Simply because if you're in power, if you hold the power, you don't want to just give it up. You know, it doesn't matter that you didn't get it through some legal means or some moral means getting it. You got it, and so you got it. It's like, no, I'm not giving it up. And so you don't expect people to just lay down and say, here, take it, you know. Everything's okay. And that applies even to African Americans here, reparations or whatever. The governments aren't going to just want to give it up. That ain't going to happen. And so, you know, what I advocate is a dual approach, a dual-pronged approach, and that is, okay, go in there, look, keep the pressure on to get what was due to you, what is owed to you, but go ahead and create your own agenda for business and economics and to make things happen that way too. You have much more control over what you can control than you do over what another person has control over. And so just being proactive, very, very important, especially with what's going on the African continent right now. Looking at the natural resources that they have. Oh my God. You know, I just think about this, just fantasize about it, how powerful that continent would be. We're talking about a continent right now with well over 1 billion people. And they have like the highest birth rate on the planet, and the majority of the people, I think about 70% of Africans are less than 25 years old. And so, you know, if you're talking about the future, it's just poised for growth. It's poised for so many positive things. In contrast to what's going on with Western nations, what's going on in Japan, you have a dying population. That's another thing you got to wrap your head around. So you don't have much of a choice. You need to really, you know, get on board with what's going on and just come together in your groups and start figuring out ways to be able to capitalize on the trend, the new trend that happens to be going on here today. A lot of it on the African continent, it's in the Caribbean, and there's even a little bit going on here in African Americans. But again, being a people here, we have been kept away from so much information. And then there's so many of us who still don't believe in self. And don't believe, and when I'm speaking of self this time, I'm not just talking about me, myself, and I'm talking about all of our people, the ethnicity, I'm talking about the race, and nationality when it comes. And there's 3 different things. And let me say this right now, because I hear a lot of people get these confused. Some people say, well, I'm not an African American, I'm black. Some will say I'm not black, I'm African American. Some would say I'm not either. I'm an American, and that is it. First, let's get this straight, okay? You can be all of them. You are, and you are all of them, simply because each one denotes something different. First, if you say that you're an American, you're talking about your nationality. As you know, from that perspective, yes, all of us, we're Americans. That's our nationality. That's where you're born. That's where you live. But if you're talking about your ethnicity, now you're African American, Afro American, or that other designation. That's where that comes in, and that denotes you. That distinguishes you from other Americans. So yeah, you're that too. And if you're saying black, you could say that applies to the race of people that you happen to belong to, or you could say African people. I don't mind either, African or black. Okay, and it used to be, if you were to go back, what they used to teach us in school was that there were three separate groups of people on planet. One being Caucasoid, one being Mongoloid, and one being Negroid. But I think they've kind of gotten away from that a little bit, and they might even add some others, like Australians, Australoid. They've added that in, and some other ones with some of the Arab people. But like I said, growing up, those were the main three. But I just want to make a point, again, with the perceptions and all, and just to make sure that you understand that you're not just one. It's like if somebody said, well, what are you? You can say, well, I'm an American. Well, wait a minute. No, I don't mean what nationality you are. I'm talking about what gender. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you could be American, you could be male. You could be American, you could be female. Or everything else that's in between. I just want to get that. I want to put that out there so that you have a good understanding of what I'm speaking of there. But we're going back to this self-esteem and this race-esteem. And there are just so many of us who don't believe in self, but even more who don't believe in self as a race. And that's where the problem happens to be. And I will say this. One thing that really hurt me was back in the day, going down when President Barack Obama was in office, and my company went down to meet with some of the dignitaries, presidents, ministers, and all that came over from Africa, from all those nations. And it was one country that I was going to go to, and before I could go and meet with the minister, the person there at the gate asked me, she brought me over and said, where are the white people in your organization? And I said, well, I don't have any white organization. I had Hispanics, I had African American, there was an Asian, but I didn't have I didn't have an Asian. There was just a Hispanic and African American. And she told me that what I needed to do, she said from now on, if I was going to speak with the people, that I should at least go and find a homeless person, a white person. And she said, clean him up and just go to a Goodwill store and buy him a suit and put the suit on him, let him dress in it, and just pay him a little money and just bring him along. She said he wouldn't have to say a word. All he had to do was just show his presence, and it would change that perception. Again, speaking about power perception and the narrative that goes along with that as to what those people can do versus what you can do. But that kind of hurt me. I've never forgotten it, and I'll continue speaking about it until we get to change our perception. And with that being stated, I've got this right here is coming a little bit late, but it fits perfectly with what I happen to be speaking about right now. And I actually, should have played a couple of months ago when I had my daughter here after Juneteenth. But anyway, the information is so vital. It's only about 8 minutes, but I want you to check this out because it's speaking about. This is a doctor who happens to be talking, and a very sharp lady, but it's about race and identity. And there are 5 quick tips for positive racial self-esteem. So check it out.
Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. For those of you who haven't been here before, welcome. My name is Dr. Jenny from the block. And if you've been here before and still haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, just come on and do that. Let's knock it out so you can get notified when I'm dropping more of these gems. So let's jump straight into it. Today's video is supposed to be brief and to the point. First, I want to say happy Juneteenth, y'all. Happy Juneteenth. It is June 19th, and for the African American Black community, this is our celebration of our emancipation, of the freedom of the last slaves that were in Galveston, Texas, that didn't even know they were free. I won't jump into the story of Juneteenth. I would like y'all to do your own research if you're not familiar with it. And if I find some good resources, I will put them below in the description box. But I wanted to use today to talk about the importance of racial identity and self-esteem. And believe it or not, y'all, there is a correlation between our racial categories and how we feel about ourselves. So let's jump into it. First, racial identity is the grouping of you into a racial category of people that look similarly to you. So that is how we identify Black, Asian, Latinx, white, etc. So those are our groupings. And then self-esteem is our personal values and judgments about ourselves. And our self-esteem is also impacted by external factors. So it can be our family, our schools, our community, our churches, etc. So all those things factor into how we feel about ourselves. So when you put those two terms together, you get racial self-esteem. The biggest positive benefit of having a healthy sense of racial self-esteem is that it serves as a buffer and protects us from some of the detrimental effects of racial discrimination. So when you feel good about the group that you identify with, it's more of a protective mechanism. You find strength in your identity, resilience, care, connection, and that's really important. Secondly, a positive sense of racial self-esteem buffers us from psychological issues such as depression and anxiety. Also, when we have a positive racial self-esteem, it helps us achieve more. Research has shown that when you teach youth to value their racial grouping, especially in the context of the American society, that they are more likely to achieve academically and beyond. So it's really important to have that healthy sense of racial self-esteem. So I want to give you guys some 5 tips on how to boost your own self-esteem regarding your race. And this is transracial, so it doesn't need to be, I know, don't roll your eyes at me, that's not what I meant. We ain't over here on that Rachel Dolezal. Different note for a different day. But I want to give you 5 tips that can be generalized to all the racial groups here. And this is, so the first thing that you can do to have a healthy sense of racial self-esteem is to expose yourself, children, family, etc., to history, information, and resources that discuss the contributions of your racial group to our society, that discuss the positive aspects of your racial identities. And really there's not too many negatives, so I don't want to frame it in that way. But I think oftentimes we're exposed to the oppressive messages, and it's important to understand our histories and our context, but it's also important to relearn history in a way that makes room for all of us. Each racial group in this country has made positive contributions, and it's really important that we know our own histories and that we understand the accomplishments and just overall resilience of our ancestors. Second, it's really important to discuss our feelings about the racial groups that we belong to. Being able to understand the parts of our racial identity that make us really proud and the parts of the racial identity that are very difficult for us to digest is really important and healthy. Many of us are positioned differently in society because of our racial identities, and that can evoke shame, guilt, anger, frustration, anxiety. And it's really important to give ourselves spaces to talk about the different issues that come up in our communities and just the different concerns that we have about operating in this American context through our own racial lenses. Third, I think it's really important that we have support groups or circles, gatherings where we can just celebrate each other, uplift each other, help each other out, and foster senses of community. Oftentimes, we may feel disconnected from our own cultural identity or disconnected from those who share our same racial identities. I know with all the protests going on, with all the stress, it almost seems like we're out here fighting these battles alone. I've seen a lot of people post on social media about feeling drained and burnt out and exhausted. This is the time for connection. Having that collective of people that look like you, that can understand some of your experiences, helps you feel validated, normalizes some experiences, and gives you, something to hold on to kind of lift you up out of these really dark spaces right now. Fourth, one of my favorite things, affirmations. So I am all about affirming myself, affirming other people. I don't know how many of you have watched Insecure, but at times I am Issa. I definitely walk around my house pumping myself up. I like talking to myself, uplifting myself. I do rap in the mirror, and I started doing that before I even seen Insecure. But affirm yourself, affirm your children, affirm the people in your life and in your community. We all need to hear positive things to feel cared about and loved. The fifth thing, and I think one of the more important things, is to remember that you being born into the body that you have, having the racial identity that you have, is not the problem. Here in America, there are systems that are built to oppress us and our varying identities, not just our racial identities. And to remember that there's nothing wrong with your skin, there's nothing wrong with that melanin, there's nothing wrong with it at all. Just remembering that we are operating in a system that makes you think, or wants you to think, that you are bad, that you are not worthy, and that couldn't even be further from the truth. So I hope these 5 tips help. I hope you can apply them somewhere in your life, and just take care of yourselves. Have a beautiful, enjoyable Juneteenth. I plan on enjoying this day. I'm already ready. But yeah, in the meantime, if you haven't, please remember to like, subscribe, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Jenny from the Block, where I post similar and different content. And that's also an opportunity for you to write me and give me your thoughts about my videos, and also suggest.
And there you have it. As I mentioned, you can see that her message is spot on regarding self-esteem and race esteem. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the road. We're at the end right here today. This is an abbreviated version. So I want to tell you to make sure to follow me on Instagram at RGL Biz Coach, and also on Instagram and Facebook at RGL Real Estate Pro. And make sure to go to this brand new YouTube channel, my brand new YouTube channel, that is Business Capital Letter in Motion. Go there and you can check out, if you didn't get to hear everything here on this broadcast, you can go there, because I send them once this is over. They get to be uploaded. You can listen to them in like 30-minute segments. Make sure to go there and to follow me, and to like the information, and to follow me. Make sure that you're here next week, same place, and we'll just do the full version. You get to get the regular, the 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock next week. So I will see you. Have a blessed week. Until next week, ciao, ciao.